Hi, everyone. It is now November 8. Wow. Okay. We are just moving forward very quickly. I want to pass along a video that a subscriber spoke of in the comments section. This is G. Edward Griffin, who is talking to Greg Hunter. I can't play any of this video. I was notified years ago by Greg Hunter to not play any of his videos. Okay. Kind of angers me because we are at war and we are losing our freedom, and many people are suffering the consequences of this war, and we need to circulate information as freely as we can. But I understand that people have their monetary interests to consider. Greg Hunter is a supporter of Trump. G. Edward Griffin is talking about how Trump may very well be controlled opposition. Very important to listen to, and very important. You know, I know a lot of people get angry when I talk about Trump, but I don't hear any, or I don't read any arguments. There are no facts that you are putting down except for the few crumbs that Trump throws your way. Crumbs we have always been thrown. These people who are implementing all of these agendas, they continue to go on regardless of who is in the White House, regardless of who is in Congress. They continue to implement their agenda to reshape the world into this United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 trap, the prison for all of us, where we will all be slaves for the fabulous elite, quote unquote, but they amount to a few, and they certainly are a very, very tiny group compared to the numbers of the world's people. Very few. So, we could overthrow them if the people united. If they made a decision to get out of their ignorance, to stop listening to all of the propaganda and the lies, and to really dig into what is taking place in our world, this fabricated reality that is presented to us on mainstream media is just that. It's fabricated. And I think a whole lot of people, I agree with G. Edward Griffin, who is talking about how this reality is not real. And the only way that we can make any headway is for people to just give up their willful ignorance. But it also requires so much work, and that's why I have said I don't believe we're going to get anywhere, because it's just not a matter of, hey, all right, I'm going to give up my willful ignorance. I'm going to dig into, the truth of what we are living. What G. Edward Griffin says here is most people know something's wrong. They know something's wrong, like never before. But that requires then to step out of your ignorance, step out of the matrix, to take a good hard look inside from the outside, do the research, but it also requires an awful lot of work that the individual has to do to open their mind from that closed-minded position, to put aside their beliefs, to get an awareness of their confirmation bias so that it's not operating, which works to support the lies that they are fed. It takes an enormous amount of work. And that's why, I fear we're running out of time. But I'm not the only one who is saying that Trump may very well be controlled opposition. And I have been saying since Trump got into office, please just take a step outside the matrix, look at what is going on, look at Trump's associations, look at who he is appointing in his cabinet, look at his economic advisors, look at it all, listen to what he says, but then watch what he does. The crumbs are not an argument because they are crumbs. Certainly, when they stand facing all of the evidence that this man is not what a whole lot of people think he is. And the truth of the matter is, during the Obama years, how many of us were talking about this electronic voting and how easily manipulated it is? And I did research and traced back, and I can't remember the name of the country. It was the name of the company that was in another country that pretty much controlled. One company controlled all of the electronic voting in the United States. If the bankers, if the quote-unquote elite did not want Trump in, all they had to do was hack the system. They could have gotten rid of him, but they didn't. They chose him. So, it doesn't work that you agree that the electronic voting system in the United States can be easily hacked, the numbers, the data manipulated to put somebody in the White House during the Obama years, but it's not operating during, the years where a Republican is campaigning and he wins. That's called confirmation bias. That's called someone who is stuck in the matrix and really just a team player. It is vital, and I agree with Brendan Smith when he talks about how vital it is for everybody to see that we don't have one party. We don't have two parties. We have one party. And they are all working together. And that work will destroy all of our freedoms. And if you can't even consider that Trump may have been put in that White House to be the controlled opposition, to be the nationalist, populist president, to speak truths that, they know so many people want to hear. But when you watch what he does, he spoke truth about vaccines. What has he done? He actually came out and said, hey, get your vaccine. Spoke truth about Common Core. What has he done? Common Core is still operating. Spoke truth about the Clintons. First interview he gave as the president-elect. The Clintons are good people. Leave them alone. Spoke truth about the wars, the unnecessary wars that he was going to be pulling us out of. What has he done? Nothing. We're still in the war, in a whole lot of wars, and I believe he said just recently something about how we may have to start new wars, or I can't speak to that verbatim. I've just read some articles about him saying that. You have to consider that he may be controlled opposition. And if you can't go there, then you have a very, very closed mind. Yes, I know people get angry with what I say, but you may very well end up being supporting a guy who is truly ready to take away all of your freedom. So, yeah, please listen to G. Edward Griffin. Trump really is a banker's delight. I also want to, I spoke of the BIS, the Bank of International, what is it? The BIS. Sorry, Bank for International Settlements. Yesterday, in yesterday's video. And there's an article that apparently was just posted. No, posted October 23. On the Bank for International Settlements. If you want to know more about this bank, the central bank of central banks around the world, take a look at this article. It is here, the IMF. The IMF, not the first global monetary institution. That accolade belongs to the Swiss bank, Bank for International Settlements. It predates the IMF by 14 years. It was created in 1930, primarily to settle reparation payments imposed on Germany following the First World War. Without that war, which was a major crisis event, there would have been no mandate for the BIS to exist, much as there would have been no mandate for the IMF to exist after World War II. They create the crises, and then they create the organizations that are going to solve all the crises. The BIS was also recognized from the outset as a forum for central bankers, the first of its kind, where they could speak candidly and direct the course of global monetary policy. Banking, as G. Edward Griffin very clearly explains, it's these central banks, they operate as a cartel. What does that mean? It means that they get together on a regular basis, have their meetings, and they are pursuing an agenda for the entire world, and they don't compete with one another. They work in unison to bring about what will ultimately be a cashless society and this new world order. The board of directors at the BIS, it is the heads of central banks around the world. They gather in Basel, every 8 weeks or so for a series of bi-monthly meetings, the discussions from which ordinary citizens are not privy to. Media, have you ever heard of the BIS? You don't hear, because The fabricated reality is that central banks are part of government and they operate independent of each other. They don't. They're not. Our Fed is not a federal agency. It is a private bank that has controlled our economy. Do you think a private bank really has your interest in mind or their interest in mind? It's their interests in mind. And certain key figureheads, the early years of the BIS, integral members of the Nazi regime. Many were sent to prison for war crimes. The parallels between the plans of the Nazi leadership for a post-war European economy and the subsequent process of European monetary and economic integration were real. In other words, the objectives of post-World War II internationalists mirrored those of the Nazi regime. The history of European monetary integration, you'll find the BIS was very predominant in bringing it about. One example, 1989 Delors report drafted at the BIS. It mapped out plans for a European monetary union. The BIS was very much at the heart of the Euro and the European integration project. Their latest innovation is Innovation BIS 2025. What is that all about? It's about fintech. If you want to know what fintech is, it's a term used to describe financial technology and industry encompassing any kind of technology and financial services from businesses to consumers. Fintech describes any company that provides financial services through software or other technology and includes anything from mobile payment apps to cryptocurrency. And Innovation 2025, it is the cashless society. You can read the details, but their priorities include the progression of fintech and global reforms to national payment systems. The BIS narrative of questioning the role of money in the digital age, which began in the wake of Brexit and Donald Trump's presidency, is central to these ambitions. The hub will help the private sector to fully realize the major opportunities. Corporations, eventually, the major corporations will no longer accept checks for payment. They will only accept payment online. The smaller companies will eventually force upon you, you have to pay via your phone or some other kind of technology. They will no longer accept cash. And that is coming, which means government, bankers, they will have full control over every penny that you own. Full control. You really want to hand over full control to people who are control freaks? I don't think so. Private sector companies are due to play an instrumental part in the drive towards the full digitization of money and the prospect of central bank digital currency. The motivations behind Innovation BIS 2025, the integration of digital central bank money into a distributed ledger technology infrastructure, tokenized assets between financial institutions. Tokens are digital assets that can be transferred from one party to another. The rise of distributed ledger and making the technology compatible with payment systems is crucial to central banks realizing their aims of implementing a cashless society. This is why the Bank of England and the Federal Reserve are in the midst of reforming their systems. Innovation and technology are reshaping the financial landscape, and how the scars left by the financial crisis and the post-crisis environment mean it is necessary to reform the way the central banking community operates. This is stated by one of the board members or chair of the BIS, and this is what they're working on right now. They're propping up the system with the quantitative easing, just printing money, throwing it into the system. More and more people, by the way, the crisis has already, it never stopped. It never stopped. More and more people have fallen off that financial cliff. It goes on, and just because you don't hear about it doesn't mean it's not happening. It's happening. So, my hunch, they still are waiting to get their 5G infrastructure up and ready and operating, and the digitization of our money. Still working on getting all of the compatible softwares working together. And once they have that all done, the economy is going to crash. They may crash it sooner. And we may just be languishing for, several years before they come out and announce a new economic system. Uncertainty and division generated through a volatile geopolitical climate is coinciding with the technological innovation that the BIS and their members want to utilize as part of an agenda to make all assets intangible, the end of physical notes and coins, the end of cashless or cash societies. They use the crises that, we've been living, certainly, since the Trump years. Prevailing geopolitical conditions are enabling the BIS to advance their goals through Innovation 2025, the rise in protectionism, which by extension is aligned to resurgent nationalism, populism. It's not detrimental to central banks. Crisis management. And this is what they talk about. Carstens is, you can read above to find out, but Carstens was, I guess, one of the head of the BIS or working for the BIS. Crisis management. He was talking about that in a speech. It's paramount to internationalists, to globalists. Economic crisis is beneficial, provided the BIS and fellow global bodies are tasked with managing the fallout. Notice how they concentrate their efforts on management rather than resolution. Each outbreak of crisis is in effect an opportunity. Never let a good crisis go to waste, which is perhaps why no sustained effort goes into resolving fundamental flaws within the system. So Carsten's second speech, Central Bank Innovation from Switzerland to the World, tells us about the strategy, the BIS 2025 strategy. And the strategy is to bring in the technology for a cashless world. In our previous medium-term plan, the emphasis was mainly on addressing the challenges associated with the aftermath of the great financial crisis. In this post-crisis environment, Amid rapid economic and technological change, the needs of central banks and other financial authorities have evolved, and it's preparing ourselves for the challenges of tomorrow. So these crises are engineered to bring about a whole new economic system. Swiss National Bank was one of the first central banks to introduce the concept of the real-time gross settlement system, the same system which is now ripe for international reform to accommodate fintech. The BIS, as the world's oldest international financial institution, remains the principal center for international central bank cooperation. This understates the BIS somewhat. They are at the apex of the world financial system. And the media never, ever discusses that central bank. So yes, 2025, the next step in the quest to harmonize digital technology like distributed ledger with the next generation of payment systems, thus endangering the existence of physical money. As the world grows more unstable, both economically and politically, central banks, in league with the private sector, will seek to take advantage of perpetual crisis to achieve their ends. We're living that perpetual crisis. The longer the BIS remains in the shadows, the more likely their initiative is to succeed. So it's important to have an understanding that, the Fed is a private bank controlled by another central bank, controlled by the apex of the world financial system. It's important to realize that life is engineered by a few very crazy, sick, immoral, psychopathic, nut job, crazy people who just want to reshape the world for the elites' pleasure. And the pleasure that they have, if you don't understand the pathology of psychopathy, narcissism, you won't fully understand what's coming. These are, not quite human beings. They love to watch life being destroyed. Evil is the opposite of live, right? Evil, spell that backwards. Live. Evil likes to destroy. Good likes to enhance life. These are very evil people that are in positions of power, and they are working towards this new world order. And it's not pretty. As it is, what we're living is not pretty. So it's going to get worse. And yes, there's just no way of stopping any of this when, you have an awful lot in the awake community that don't really care. And then you have more who are quite determined to remain in the matrix. That's upsetting, but that's reality. And when you begin to suffer the consequences of evil, that's when you begin to understand that your life is no longer yours. Somebody else is pulling the strings. Stay safe. I will read this article in my next video.